In the bustling city of Baltimore, New Year's Eve is alive with joyous celebrations. Private parties fill apartment buildings, echoing with laughter and music. But amidst this atmosphere of happiness, tragedy strikes suddenly and violently. Bullets tear through the air without warning, cutting short the revelry as they claim innocent lives and leave others gravely wounded. In a matter of minutes, the attack ceases, leaving chaos and fear in its wake. Eleanor, a dedicated police officer, is in the midst of resolving a minor dispute at a diner when she receives the urgent call to respond to the shooting. Racing to the scene, she joins her fellow officers as they investigate the source of the gunfire. Their attention is drawn to a 17th floor apartment nearby, where all the shots originated. Before they can take further action, the apartment is engulfed in a devastating explosion, spreading panic throughout the building. In the aftermath of the blast, Eleanor and her colleague rush to the scene of destruction, where they begin recording videos of the fleeing residents. Amidst the chaos, there's a sense of urgency as they recognize the possibility that the perpetrator may be among the crowd, slipping away in the confusion. Soon, law enforcement, including both police and FBI agents, arrive at the scene only to find no traces of the perpetrator. Eleanor manages to climb the stairs to the 17th floor without a gas mask, leaning against the apartment wall for support. She subtly suggests investigating the toilet for potential evidence related to the shooter. Back at the bureau, the chief FBI investigator, Lamarck, briefs the department about the task they have at hand finding out the mass shooter and explains the things they need to keep in mind while carrying on investigations. On the sideline, Eleanor silently watches Lamarck's speech. Then, as she distributes some coffee, she overhears Lamarck and Capleton debating about closing down the highway. It becomes apparent that Capleton is more concerned about the governor's image than catching the killer. Eleanor engages in conversation with a fellow officer, expressing her perspective. Lamarck, overhearing her, inquires about her reasoning. She elaborates, suggesting that the killer seems to seek solace rather than wreaking havoc, and cease their spree only after feeling satiated for the night. However, she suspects the possibility of further violence. Lamarck seems content with her response, introducing himself before departing. At daybreak, Eleanor receives a call from her supervisor, informing her of Lamarck's urgent request to meet at a nearby cafe. She swiftly makes her way there and discovers Lamarck embroiled in yet another disagreement with Capleton. Capleton argues for keeping the beaches open despite the imminent danger posed by the mass killer on the loose. After Capleton departs, Eleanor joins Lamarck. He insists on her assistance in the case due to her unique perspective, seeing her as a crucial link between the Baltimore Police Department and the FBI. Agent Mackenzie. They brainstorm to decipher the possible motive behind the shooter's actions. They head to the police station for a briefing with other members of the investigation team. At that time, their only lead was to call in the painters who had worked on the bombed flat 2 years prior. Another member, Krupp, mentions that the counterterrorism unit is conducting background checks at the request of Frank Graber, another FBI agent. This displeases Lamarck, and he reminds the room that he's in charge of the operation and that everything must be approved by him. Then, a woman brings a document for Lamarck to sign from Capleton, indicating his agreement to not impose a curfew, which is exactly what he doesn't agree to. Yet, he signs it anyway. During the briefing, Marcaine reveals that the weapon used was an antique M21 sniper rifle, older than the firearms database, presenting a new challenge for the team. Eleanor suggests investigating the arsenal keepers, believing they may provide another clue. Lamarck orders the team to pursue this lead en route to the morgue. Eleanor notices Lamarck's unease with the involvement of other teams, but Mackenzie reassures her that it's typical for cases to become more complex with multiple teams involved. In the morgue, the trio is taken aback by the sight of the numerous victims laid out before them. Lamarck begins questioning the two cops about their assumptions regarding the killer. They both speculate that the perpetrator is likely a man, possibly with military training. However, Eleanor suggests that the killings may be impulsive, as there is no pattern. Lamarck agrees, adding that the killer doesn't seem to derive pleasure from others' suffering, as all victims were killed with a single shot. He concludes that the killer's aim is to disrupt societal behavior. Their discussion is suddenly interrupted by a police officer announcing the discovery of the killer. Hurrying to the scene, they find Agent Frank, leading the operation. Frank explains that they've located a young man in an apartment building who is uncooperative and threatening violence. Lamarck expresses frustration, especially since they're unsure if the young man is armed. They witness the team forcefully entering the apartment, causing the young man to throw objects before jumping out of the window. Lamarck is upset by Frank and Capleton's impulsive actions, which they seem hesitant to acknowledge. Back at the station, Lamarck and the two officers question the painters from the flat. One of them, Rodney Lang, brings his baby due to his wife's work schedule. During the questioning, Eleanor pays close attention to the painters before Lamarck asks her to take the baby outside to avoid distractions. Later, Eleanor receives a lab report indicating that the killer is a vegan. Lamarck becomes angry because she didn't promptly share the report with him, causing tension between them. On their way home, Lamarck apologizes and invites her to dinner to discuss the new evidence. During their conversation, Lamarck confides in Eleanor about feeling constrained by Capleton's influence, which could potentially endanger his job. He also confronts her about her FBI rejection, citing psychiatric issues such as depression as the reason. Eleanor admits that she joined the police force as a way to save herself from her own self-destructive tendencies. A few days later, another horrifying incident unfolds at a shopping mall. A man is caught stealing clothes from the male changing room and washing them in the sink area of the toilet. He's later found taking leftover food in the food court, confronted by mall security guards. As the guards attempt to inspect his bag and he told them that he just want to go home, he suddenly pulls out a gun and fatally shoots those around him. Evading capture, he uses grenades hidden in a nearby dustbin to fend off the pursuing police force. Lamarck and Eleanor arrive at the scene shortly afterward, shocked by the carnage. Upon seeing Capleton arrive by helicopter, Lamarck immediately instructs Eleanor and Jack to locate the shirt worn by the killer. Following the order, the two officers head to a landfill where the mall's trash had been disposed of earlier. They meticulously sift through the rubbish by hand in search of the crucial evidence. Meanwhile, at the station, Graber and Capleton propose airing footage of the killer on a popular television show in hopes of identification. Lamarck opposes the idea, but Nathan insists they comply or face termination. Despite Lamarck's objections, the mall footage is broadcasted, leading to viewer calls. Among the calls, one person claims to be the killer, declaring allegiance to a shadow army. Despite skepticism from Lamarck and Eleanor, the officers track the caller's location and move to apprehend him. Preparing for the operation, Jack, Marquand, and Eleanor evacuate civilians from the area. Eleanor encounters difficulty persuading an elderly man to leave before the confrontation begins. When they realize they are the target, the caller and his associates engage in a shootout, resulting in casualties. During the investigation, Lamarck and Eleanor suspect the shooter has access to old guns and military equipment. Additionally, lab results show the man was on a plant-based diet leading up to New Year's Eve. However, after the failed crackdown, authorities lose confidence in Lamarck and his team, removing them from further involvement in the case. After Lamarck and Eleanor are suspended from the investigation, Eleanor goes to a bar with Lamarck and returns home feeling disheartened. While relaxing in the bath, she has a sudden realization. She storms to the house of one of the three painters who had worked on the blown-up apartment a couple of years ago, Lang. During his interrogation, Lang had been deceptive. He had actually been subcontracting his work to increase profits, hiring individuals without proper IDs or permits. Lang confesses to Eleanor and Lamarck that he hires ex-convicts and illegal immigrants because they work for very low wages. He recalls a man named Dean who matches the description of the killer. Lang provides all the information he knows about Dean and assists in creating a facial sketch. Dean had previously worked at a meat processing factory but stopped consuming meat and dairy afterward. Lamarck and Eleanor take Dean's sketch to the slaughterhouse, but receive no leads. Eventually, an older worker identifies the man as Dean Posse, who was rumored to have killed a superior during his time at the factory. Dean was known for being bullied by the superior, and one day claimed the superior had fallen into the meat grinder. However, the other workers suspected Dean of committing the murder, and he was imprisoned for 2 years. On their way to Dean's family home, Eleanor gathers more information about him, discovering that he had been released on parole and had shown symptoms of sensitivity to light and a preference for isolation, as noted by the prison psychiatrist. Despite being suspended from the case, Lamarck and Eleanor decide to continue investigating on their own and refrain from involving Mackenzie, who is still an active FBI agent. They obtain the address of the Posse family from the factory where Dean worked. Upon arrival, they meet an elderly woman who identifies herself as Dean's mother. She provides further insights into her son's life, mentioning how her late husband had trained Dean in firearm use from a young age. However, tragedy struck when Dean was only 6 years old. Mistaking him for an animal, his parents accidentally shot him in the head, forever altering his demeanor. Once a cheerful and outgoing child, Dean became reclusive after the accident and grew into an extreme loner. The only time he seemed content was during the pandemic, when the streets were deserted, allowing him to wander alone. Despite Mrs. Posse's claims that Dean hasn't visited her in a long time, Eleanor realizes that Dean is actually hiding in the outhouse. As she tries to warn Lamarck, he is fatally shot. Eleanor instructs Mrs. Posse to her gun and phone, assuring her that she's off the case and only wants to help Dean. Mrs. Posse tries to coax Dean out, but when he refuses, she tragically takes her own life with Eleanor's gun. Dean eventually emerges and confronts Eleanor, expressing his contempt for humanity and the societal grind. Despite Eleanor's attempts to reason with him and fulfill his last wishes, a police patrol car arrives, causing Dean to suspect Eleanor of betrayal. She denies informing the police, suggesting it may have been a neighbor who heard the gunshot. In a fit of rage, Dean injures Eleanor and holds her captive as he prepares to confront the police. He kills 2 officers and detonates explosives, causing further casualties among the officers who attempt to approach the outhouse. Initially attempting to reason with Dean, Eleanor shifts tactics when persuasion fails, focusing on distracting him and planning her escape. Seizing the right moment, she bites Dean's throat, inflicting severe injury. As the police officer manages to flee the underground shed and reunite with the rest of the force, Dean escapes into the vast fields behind the house. There, the police find him sitting, bleeding from his throat. In a final desperate move, Dean raises his gun but is swiftly shot dead by the officers. In the aftermath, sometime later in Nathan's office, Eleanor is cautioned never to divulge the details of her and Lamarck's unauthorized investigation into Dean's house. The FBI confirms the perpetrator's identity, and Eleanor is offered a position as an intelligence analyst, which she declines. Instead, she suggests Lamarck be posthumously awarded a Medal of Valor and that her pension be directed to his husband. Additionally, Eleanor requests to be appointed as a special agent, a request that is granted. The scene concludes with Eleanor shaking hands with Capleton before departing. Reflecting on Lamarck's words, she heads home. Film ends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.